When we're thinking about UK's energy future, what we really need to do first of all is the Cinderella subject, the one people usually add on it as an afterthought. We need to start with energy conservation. We have some of the worst quality of homes, for example, in Western Europe, so we need to insulate energy efficiency measures in our homes. So that's the place to start. But then in terms of supplying energy, what we need to do is, of course, look towards renewables, wind, on and offshore, solar, and eventually going towards tidal, where there's a really exciting tidal project being developed now in Swansea Bay, which has huge potential. The fact is that Britain has some of the richest resources of renewable energy possibilities in the world. We need to take advantage of that. Is it possible to deliver cheaper and greener energy? I think we have to be realistic in terms of cheap energy. The era of cheap energy, the fossil fuel era, is gone. If you listen to the International Energy Agency, they predict that the price of gas will rise by 40% by 2020. We're not looking for cheap energy. What we need is good, clean energy. And of course, it's always worth coming back to the issue of energy conservation. By far the cheapest, greenest and best energy you can have is the energy you don't need to use. In terms of when we're thinking about energy generation, it's really important to think that any form of energy generation has an environmental cost. I often speak at public meetings and people say wind farms kill birds, and that's true. Of course, buildings kill birds because they fly into the windows as well. So we have to acknowledge that any form of energy, whatever we're doing, will have an environmental cost. And that means, again, we have to really focus on only generating the energy that we need to use. I came here today in the tube looking at all of those video ads in the tube, and do we really need video ads in the tube? Well, I'm afraid the coalition government's pledge to be the greenest government ever has turned into a very sad, sick joke. The most obvious area, and perhaps the longest lasting one, is in terms of its energy policy, which has been a total failure, a total abdication. And the push for fracking is both a fantasy and very dangerous in distracting from the focus on renewables and conservation that we need. But beyond that, issues like the badger cull, very visible and obvious issue, utterly not based on any evidence-based science. All the evidence from the science says it was never going to work, and as the test showed, was deeply inhumane. Our forests, the desire to concrete all over the green belt, to build new roads, to build the environmentally disastrous HS2. It's really just a long litany of non-green, non-evidence-based policy that's not what Britain needs. So apparently Boris Johnson is claiming that we have better air quality in London than most European cities. Well, that is just demonstrably nonsense. We're exceeding European levels for nitrogen dioxide and particulate matter, the tiny particles that can get down deep in your lungs and do a great deal of damage. We're exceeding those European standards. We're facing fines as a result of that. Just recently we saw a report on Oxford Street that said Oxford Street, admittedly, it's a particular closed area, a canyon with huge numbers of taxis and buses, but that has worse air quality than Beijing or Bombay. So we have a situation where we have an air quality crisis in Britain, around Britain. It's not just London, but particularly in London, and that's something we desperately need to tackle. And we need to tackle that with active transport policies, encouraging walking and cycling. We need to very much cut emissions from buses and taxis, which are major contributors, and we've got to cut traffic. Well, in UK energy policy, it's very clear that on and offshore wind are very much an important part of what we need to rely on. We have huge resources there, huge possibilities. And offshore wind has the real potential to generate enormous quantities of power. And onshore, particularly, has the potential to really have community-owned energy generation. So what we can do is have communities making a choice about saying, right, we want to generate some money for our village. People might have some money to invest. Let's get together, locate a site, generate energy for that village, which brings both money and it has the energy source that it needs right there on tap. Should the government subsidise energy projects? Well, the fact is, what we have to do is we need to meet our future energy needs. We need to do that in a green, environmentally friendly way. So what we need to do is see particularly support for community-owned energy. The government has finally recently, about 6 months ago, introduced a policy for that, but it needs to do a lot more work. What they've introduced, what they've funded, will do 9 projects a year until 2020, which is a drop in the ocean. You know, I've visited lots of really exciting community energy projects, a place called Worley in Lancashire, where they've almost finished construction of a reverse Archimedes screw in the river there, and a lovely spot where the Cistercian monks also built a weir. They knew where the most of the power in the river was, and you know, that's the community's got together, raised the money, is going to see the benefits of that, and that's the kind of thing that the government needs to support on a much larger scale.